Usually my ideas are pretty vague at the start. For example, with this piece, I knew that I wanted to design a Victorian mourning brooch based around these fantastic antique glass check buttons that I found. But when it comes to knowing what the finished design is actually going to look like, usually I don't know that until after I've finished it. So that's why I generally start with making a mock-up of the design. Even if I don't actually finish the mock-up to a point where it's like a completed piece, it helps me kind of work out the details and get an overall feel for what it's going to look like. With this piece, I know I wanted to keep it somewhat simple, but give it a little bit of complexity by adding these different layers that are sort of interwoven together. I knew that the colors were going to be more significant than anything, so I wanted to keep the design somewhat plain to really let that Victorian mourning kind of feel come through. And you'll notice that the mock-up design that I came up with ended up being a little bit different than the finished design that I actually have at the end of the video. That's pretty typical for me. A lot of times my mock-ups and my finished pieces end up looking nothing alike. When I got the invitation to join the Darksome Craft Market's Out of the Crypt Spring Show, I knew immediately that I wanted to do a special mini collection for the show, and considering that my last collection was based on Victorian goth designs, this just seemed like the perfect opportunity to kind of play off of that with looking at another aspect of Victorian society. I've always been really fascinated with the way that different cultures around the world show respect to death, and Victorian mourning was actually really interesting. Victorian mourning was quite the process, and clothing played a huge role in that, especially with the colors you were allowed to wear. There was the classic all black for a period of time, of course, but in my research, I learned that shades of gray, purple, and even sometimes maroon or mauve were also significant later in the grieving period. So for this piece, I decided to use a gray-toned lilac and the steel gray color threads. For the beads, I decided to stick with the classic black to match the buttons, but with a mix of shiny and matte finishes for a little extra depth. Sometimes those little details are really what make a piece come together. In the end, I think this design turned out really nice, and it will complement the other two designs for this mini collection really well. The Mourning Blooms collection will be available exclusively during the Out of the Crypt virtual market happening May 14th through 16th. So mark your calendars and be sure to follow my Instagram as well as the Darksome Craft Market Instagram so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching!